panel of investors and bankers that are all investing and banking digital media ventures, which was not always the case, just so you guys know. So we've arrived. And I'm going to have them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit more about their area of focus. And I'm going to start with you, Rob, because you're first here next to me. Rob Vickery, co-founder and managing partner for Stage Venture Partners.
Indeed, yeah. So we're a brand new venture fund based here in Los Angeles. We launched in January. Our thesis is based around the fact that we think that Hollywood and forms of content and media have been fractured permanently by new forms of technology, whether that could be distribution, it could be gaming, it could be any kind of form in that way. So our fund is focused upon seed and A round companies. VR forms a part of that. We're taking a cautious but also slightly optimistic view on the marketplace. So we've done 2 investments thus far, and we're looking to do 2 more in VR in the next 3 to 4 weeks. So that's me.
That's fantastic. Kellerman Papp is with Moreland Partners, which is an investment bank that's in Silicon Valley, New York, and London.
Yeah, hi everybody. We're a technology-focused investment bank, so we do M&A and private capital raises. Everything we do is 100% in the technology sector. We do quite a bit on a cross-border basis too. So a third of our team is in London, and probably upwards of 40 to 45% of our clients are based somewhere in Europe. And then we do a fair bit of work out of Asia as well.
And then Sanjan with Headwaters, another investment bank.
So I'm also a banker, but don't hold that against me. I'm a managing director at Headwaters MB, which is a mid-market investment bank with about 100 investment banking professionals. Similar to Moreland, we also do M&A, about 75% sell-side M&A and the rest buy-side M&A and cap raises, mostly on the equity side. I run the digital media and internet practice, and I'm part of a 10 or 12 person technology, media, and telecom team at the firm. And in terms of digital media, internet deals at Headwaters, I've sold RightsFlow, this music publishing platform, to YouTube and Google. They're using it as their global music publishing platform. Sold Cooking.com to Target, Cooking.com was a local firm here in LA. Sold Rumblefish and social video monetization to CSAC and Rizvi Traverse. And then just in January announced that I sold FYI Television to Ericsson.
Right.
And I've actually been following the VR industry for many, many years, going back to the 90s, and I guess that sort of dates me.
And then we have Ethan, who wears several entrepreneurial hats and one investment hat, right? So you can tell us a little more.
That's right, yeah. My name's Ethan Gilmore. I come from an investment banking, private equity, and hedge fund background. I've raised money for hedge funds, private equity funds. I've also raised, as an investment banker, over $400 million of private placement debt for film libraries, done a variety of restructurings in the United States, as well as a lot of deals in Germany. I'm founder of a company called VarCrypt, and VarCrypt is it is a VR and AR focused blockchain content distribution company. This is definitely changing gears from my traditional investment banking and hedge fund background. We actually published the first VR assets on a blockchain in the world about 4 weeks ago, and I think it's very interesting for the topic of this panel is what is the business model of VR and AR, and I think blockchain technology from a content distribution perspective, a content encryption perspective, as well as dealing with a lot of the networking issues are going to be a big part of that.
And then I think Sunny and I, we're sort of the founding partners of this panel, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we were on the first venture capital panel, I think maybe a couple Digital Hollywoods ago. And
something like that.
Now it's all VR, AR.
Yeah.
So.
We were there first.
We were there,
after
Sunny.
Sun. We were there first. Yeah.
Sun was there as well, yes.
Hi guys, my name is Sunny Dillon. I am a venture capital investor in Silicon Valley. One of the founders and partners at a fund named Signia Venture Partners. We are a $100 million fund focused on early stage investments in tech companies. My background is, I started as a banker actually, but I didn't last as long as you guys. So I lasted my analyst training and then I got out during the recession. I was at Rothschild in London doing where I launched our gaming practice, then worked as the first business development hire at a venture-backed spin-off of New Line Cinema, before doing a stint at Warner Brothers Corporate Strategy and launching one of the first dating apps on the App Store in 2010. So I've been in venture capital for about 6 years now, and I have made a couple of VR investments, one which just announced today, named EONITE in the positional tracking space. But I cover pretty much all things content, entertainment, and the fun stuff is what I get to invest in. So looking forward to talking with everyone today.
I had a really good time talking to each one of the panelists because the messages are very optimistic, and I love those, right? And if you're a content producer, any content producers in the audience, just a show of hands? Any digital media companies in the VR, AR space? Okay, so a lot of people who would be interested in figuring out how to fund all that. I think Sun asked me a question this morning that kind of was very interesting. Maybe we should start with that, just to look at the market size and quality of this market. Why now? You know, we've been toying with VR, AR for, you know, we've known about the space. We've been working on the space for quite some time. Why is this the right time to make all the investments and work on all these deals? So anyone wants to take that on? Why is this market super hot for invest? Why did Magic Leap raise $1.4 billion this last year? Why?
Well, I can take a first shot at it. I think one of the differences here, and maybe I'm also thinking in particular about the recent experiences with the 3D video market in terms of film, which I think most people would say turned out to be disappointing after a strong start, or has been disappointing, and then 3D printing most recently this past year. And I think here you have started to really see a lot of the mass platform companies, such as Facebook and others, with audiences in the billions and hundreds of millions and billions, start to get into it. And because they're putting their weight behind it and really going out there, and whether it's Facebook buying Oculus and really trying to introduce glasses to the mass market, or others, I think that's a significant shift. And in particular, from a technology perspective, the technology plates, or the tectonic technology plates, as you might call it, are beginning to really move. And that's a difference with 3D printing, where the price point for the consumers was still way too high. And I don't think, you had a lot of companies going at it. You didn't have the same sort of mass consumer focus, I believe, that we have today.
I think it's an interesting space, and trying to find comparisons for this market is extremely difficult. So from being in a venture space, it's the best job in the world, but it's also the hardest job in the world, because you're trying to predict a market that doesn't technically exist right now. The consumer headsets are just really launching, and some of the launch hasn't been great. So it's a really fun but ultimately quite difficult market to value. I mean, if you're looking at Magic Leap, and that probably is one of the most common questions I ever get asked, is why is it valued at this valuation? And it really has to be that high, because the amount of money that has gone into it. It cannot be valued any lower than that. But I think as a market, the technology is still very, very early, and I think in the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be so much better and so different. And yeah, everyone's very optimistic. I kind of see it as being like the growth of home computing back in the late 70s and early 80s. I see that kind of garage kind of feel of people developing content and hardware in their homes, and I love it for that. But I think we're going to see a steady increase, but it's not going to be like that.
And what kind of technology deals are you guys seeing right now as they come across your desk to be funded? I mean, is this the infrastructure stage, or is it the application stage, or what are some of the things that you're seeing?
I'm seeing a lot of content deals, and we struggle with content. We're a technology venture fund, so we're going to have something other than IP around content and characters and storylines. But we're really interested in. We're seeing a lot of analytics platforms. We're seeing a lot of kind of ad tech platforms that are trying to capture this market. The big challenge with both of those is there's not that many developers, and there's also not that much of an audience. So, selling ads to a small audience is going to be difficult for a while. So we're starting to see a lot of that. We're seeing a lot in the 360 video space, and I quite like 360 video, but I also don't. I think it's a very short-term form of VR. I think people are going to want more immersive experiences, and that's where 360 video doesn't quite do enough of that. But yeah, it's we're seeing all sorts of stuff.
It's fun.
Lots of gaming as well.
Yeah. Sunny, what are you seeing?
So yeah, I'll start by echoing some of that and then kind of jumping on and saying, I think 360 video is pretty terrible. It's not VR. It's a fad. It'll be there as like a medium that Facebook supports in its in-feed kind of promotional material stuff. There's like no technical expertise that's going to end up going into it at this point. I think a lot of the cameras that are coming out there's more than half a dozen you can buy right now. The Samsung one's probably the better one that's going to be coming out in the market that lets you film this stuff. I think it's going to have legs on UGC. You're going to see folks that are filming parties, Coachella, et cetera, in 360, right? And the cardboard viewers and the ones that basically strap your phone to your face kind of guys, or the ones that are all in one kind of headsets that allow for 360 video, like head tracking. I think you'll see a lot of that. I don't think that's VR. I think it's like 0.5. It's like what your car phone was to what your smartphone is now for where we're headed. On one end of the spectrum, you get like, we're on a VR panel right now, so if everyone in here has not read Ready Player One, then you should not be in this room, because it's kind of a Shangri-La as to where things are headed. And as a step towards that, I'm a big believer in photogrammetry and the understanding of realism. If something has to look real for you to think it's real, right? That could be one of two things. It doesn't mean that like this table or my panelists have to look like themselves. It could be avatars of them, but they should move like they do, they should speak like they do, and they should interact with me the way that they would in real life. So photogrammetry, part of that is making it look very realistic, but then there's a ton of other things around communication and infrastructure that would make telepresence far more believable. I'm a big supporter of that. So anything that can do what's called light field capture, so basically capture you folks with 2 or 3 cameras and create a hologram of you and have you move around. All that data is being compressed and rendered, et cetera, all live, so that it actually feels like I'm talking to a hologram version of you live there and then. I think that's the real augmented reality killer application that I think is going to change the world. So I'm interested in stuff like that, but yes, we're seeing a ton of 360 video, we're seeing a ton of analytics and ad networks and all that kind of stuff too. I think it's interesting, but there's no eyeballs for it yet. So if there's picks and shovels that you're going to peg towards general trends you believe are coming, which I think we all believe that content creation is very necessary. So what I've chosen to do is peg some of my infrastructure bets on content creation tool sets, that if you can move ahead with the market fast enough, you avoid becoming obsolete, because the platforms aren't just going to recreate you. If it's really hard to do, they'll buy you, which for a small fund gives me more than a return in the near term, before consumer eyeballs develop.
Which was what happened with broadband. So it's somewhat similar.
You could use it as a proxy.
Yeah.
I think there's something that is really curious to me, and I haven't seen enough of it, so we're contemplating even developing our own, is finding a VR platform which creates a persistent world when you're inside and outside of the headset. So something that concerns me is length of time in the headset. Now, no one knows that for sure. I would bet on the fact that people aren't going to sit there and watch a movie for an hour and a half in the headset. So we're really curious about platforms which are allowing you to engage with the VR world with your mobile phone, with your console, with your PC, with any other device. So that when you dive in and out and you get that premium VR experience, but you're also augmenting it with other platforms alongside. So we like that kind of stuff. And I haven't seen enough of that yet.
So Ethan, you are working on a platform. You want to talk a little bit about it?
Right. Well, the platform that I'm working on right now, it's I mentioned it earlier. It's VAR Crypt, and VAR Crypt is VR and AR together, which gives you VAR, and it's called Crypt because it's a cryptographic blockchain distribution protocol. What blockchain does is it deals with a lot of problems right now that are current in many different types of content distribution. One is it allows you as a content creator, and I know there's a few content creators in here, moving down the line, if you're able to make content and publish it onto a blockchain, you'll be able to publish it, encrypt it, and distribute it globally and monetize it in the future. And that's going to be a very, very powerful thing from a business perspective. Granted, currently you're forced to monetize your content distribution via cryptocurrency. So you'd have to trap it into a light wallet and collect, Bitcoins or something like that, and then you could exchange that into a currency of your choice at the bank. But moving down the line, this platform could be incredibly powerful. The other thing, I don't know how many people here are familiar with IPFS, the Interplanetary File System. That allows you to link up multiple blockchains, which gives you access to multiple Merkle trees that will also be able to distribute different types of content, and you'll also be able to open up hard drive space on people's computers. So you're creating a permanent worldwide web that's also going to really enable massive transfers of data that are going to help facilitate the VR and the AR revolution, which is what we're also excited about. This is going to take some time, but that future looks very, very interesting.
And it's interesting when I've done a lot of broadband startups, and the bandwidth was so expensive. We were using peer-to-peer streaming platforms out of China at that time. There were some in Europe, and there were quite a few in China. And what they were doing is they were doing distributed computing to create a platform to distribute broadband video, which was very heavy, file-intensive stuff. Do you believe, and then today, they didn't quite make it because a lot of issues, security, et cetera, large companies didn't buy into it. Why do you think distributed computing is going to drive this wave of technologies?
That's a great question. Well, I think it's really comes down to the cryptography that is emblematic in all of the blockchains. So the cryptographic nature of it, you can also track people's data, you can track their information. There's even ways to, for example, scan somebody's eye when they put on VR goggles, encrypt that into the blockchain so we can really cut down on all different types of identity theft, fraud. And the other thing in regards to IPFS is it is an upgraded HTTP protocol. So it stores data faster and it does it better, and it also opens up excess hard drive space on everybody's PC. And as VR and AR become more common, there's going to be stronger GPUs, there's going to be bigger hard drives. So when you link that onto a blockchain, I think we're not just talking about the next computing platform, we're talking about the next technological ecosystem that's going to completely change our world every bit like it was foreseen in Ready Player One or something else along those lines.
So now that we sort of believe this will happen, so the platform will handle the capacity of the computing power needed to really get this out in the market. If someone's sitting here in the audience producing VR, AR content today, should they continue on? I mean, is based on Sun's original postulate, is that going to be next 2, 5, 10 years before people can interact with it?
You can get money to fund this stuff, not from venture funds most likely, but you can get money from a bunch of different content players that are backing people out there. If you have a portfolio and you're successful in an existing medium, and you can now say that you want to start doing VR, you're obviously a talented content creator that has a place within VR. Figuring out the new platform isn't necessarily going to be something that's restricted, however, to the Spielbergs and every other amazing film director out there. There's going to be kids coming out of USC that are doing film projects now that blow everyone away, that really tackle the use case of VR in a new and innovative way. Do not try and port over what's worked on mobile, what's worked on PC as platforms or online distribution platforms into VR. It's rehashing the same wheel, and it's going to be very, very hard to really scale. I think given that we're so nascent right now, you should be experimenting, and there's other people's dime to be financing that. For example, the headsets to sell, okay, what sold the Xbox? It was not it wasn't cool trailers and everything, it was Halo that sold the Xbox, right? The video game. So that kind of killer content experience is going to be coming. It's still not been figured out yet. There's some cool demos, like Tilt Brush for the Vive to show you 3D painting, for example. There's going to be a lot more of those. So I think going to the headsets themselves and their own in-house content funds is a great starting point, as well as going to certain brands. There's a platform in San Francisco named Partnered. I think it's partnered.co that a guy named Baldwin Cunningham runs. There's a ton of brands on there that are funding VR content right now. And like I said, I'm incredibly biased, so don't go pitching them, shitty 360 video. It's just like they've seen that, and anybody taking an orb camera can go do that. Leverage the fact that you guys are amazing content creators here in LA, for example. You have so many more advantages about how to create compelling story and narrative, etc. Go create something, a pitch piece for these folks, upload it through the platform, and you'll get them. There's other people out there that are throwing money at this. It's just not necessarily a venture-backable kind of business from my perspective. Maybe you have a different view.
No, I agree. It's definitely not venture backable. I mean, it's kind of a bit like a game development studio where it's very hit driven, and that for us is a little bit too much risk. I would also suggest that you look at some of the studios. We're based here in LA. I fundamentally believe that the content creation world of VR should and will live and be the home here, just because of the sheer amount of talent that we have. But talk to the studios. They're all looking to create additional content. If you look at what happened with The Jungle Book and Jon Favreau, you should read about some of his work, what he's doing, and also what he's been saying recently about creating additional immersive content that can go alongside the film. So the studios have got funds for content creation. I'd also talk to some of not just the headset manufacturers, but talk about some of the people who are putting components within the hardware required to either build the headset or to be the PC or the console that's running it. So companies like AMD have also got funding and availability, and also not just money, but also tools. Because shooting this stuff isn't as easy as it used to is to shoot a standard 2D feature film. So you need things like studio space. So be a bit creative with it, and maybe learn a little bit from how people have funded films in the past. That's my background. When I was an investment banker at Lloyd's, I financed things like the Bond franchise, which was very easy to fund because it was very predictable. But look at how people raise money for feature films, which is based upon two things: pre-sales, talent attached to the feature. So look at things like that and try and be creative with it, but definitely be brave. No 360 videos, please.
Just one quick comment on that. Other huge source of expertise here around creation and understanding how it's done. There is a wealth of expertise within the VFX industry here. Yeah. We have ILM and stuff up north, and Pixar and stuff, but you guys have a wealth of expertise of folks that know the VFX space really well. So many of them are so highly relevant now that their skill sets that they've been noodling on and working on themselves. For example, DreamWorks Animation, I don't know what's happening to this lab now after the Comcast deal, but it had a VR lab, right? I think it was called Dream Labs or something. They all have these skunkworks kind of project areas where people have been noodling on VR since, the companies haven't been around since the 70s, but since Jaron Lanier and all these guys were actually working on the early headsets back in the day, people have been doing this. If you remember back in the 90s, you would go to a shopping mall and you'd play this game called Pterodactyl, right? People would be in those big giant headsets that literally looked like Doc Emmett Brown's the big thing that he wears. Anyway, so you'd have people that just looked ridiculous. It wasn't ergonomically designed, but it was early demonstrations that there was a market for it within shopping malls, etc. So there's other folks that are actually building this stuff right now for destination VR, arcade kind of experiences. And you'll be surprised, everybody is so excited about the space, everybody will talk to you. It's not like you need an amazing intro or network or anything like that. Go to VRLA, go to SVVR, go to any one of these VR conferences if you're serious, and you can pretty much go and talk to anyone, including the CEO of Oculus, who will talk to you emphatically like a fanboy, because everybody wants this industry to succeed. So.
And interestingly enough, tomorrow, I don't want to take too much time away from this panel, but we have a panel at 1:15 that's a crowdfunding Reg A Plus panel. So if you're developing games and things that are actually targeting consumers, that may be a way to fund a digital media content play, and then maybe work with you guys at a later stage.
But I have a question for the panel, which is: do you feel like there are too many headset or eyeglass companies coming out? I mean, because I deal with later stage stories, and I've been approached by so many companies in the eyeglass area that want to sell themselves. It's not even funny, and there's not room for all those players.
So I just got back from China 3 weeks ago. There was what was it called? The Beijing Virtual Reality Summit, I think. And I think there were 2,000 people in attendance in a suburb of Beijing in this art museum. And there were 2,000 more that were turned away. Almost exclusively investors, developers, or just more than enthusiasts, people that were really involved in the space. They were almost all gaming. They haven't had their Oculus moment that kind of kickstarted the industry here in the West just yet. I think it's a natural progression of where we started. VR was gaming. I mean, we're still largely there in terms of the type of content that's coming out. But the other surprising element, Sun, was that how many headsets? So many headsets. The leading ones are Baofeng and Tencent's working on a mobile all-in-one kind of headset as well. I think that people there do not have room scale VR, right? They don't have the 15 by 15 in Beijing apartments. I mean, Jesus, in San Francisco, nobody has that for real estate, right? So I think anything that can improve mobile VR is going to be first and foremost to market. Magic Leap's going to be the most impressive if they can productize what they.
So let's
their
talk
research.
about them. I mean, we can't not
Talk about Magic
notice the elephant, the big pink elephant in the room. So why is everyone betting on Magic Leap? Why do you guys, knowing what you know, why?
I think if it becomes the de facto AR platform for business, it will change the world. I mean, I've spent a lot of time with the guys at Daiquiri and what they're doing with their motorcycle helmet type, visor, which is allowing you to explode an engine and work out how it goes and puts it back together again.
Yeah.
That's really cool shit. I think if it does that, then that's the potential for it. I mean, it is drastically overvalued, but it's a really cool platform, and it could
It's
do
applied
that.
to so many industries, so they're probably valuing.
It's just 'cause the amount of
entry
money
into
they've
different-
raised. Yeah, they have
but
to.
that as
Yeah.
well, like the
Yeah.
unicorn problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just going to say, too, I think in regards to Magic Leap, it's emblematic of augmented reality as a whole. I think everybody that I've spoken to is betting on augmented reality becoming much larger than virtual reality, just because we'll be able to engage in our daily lives and have various elements laid over on top of our experience. So we could be sitting here speaking, and we could have our Twitter account, our Instagram, email. We could have behind us when we look. We could have television playing. It's just the applications for B2B as well in augmented reality, for high-speed trading, for 3D printing. I mean, using augmented reality as basically a print preview for 3D printing if you're in engineering. I think that is also why everybody keeps talking about Magic Leap, because A, they're very, very secretive. What we've seen looks incredible, and they've raised a lot of money. But augmented reality, I think, is going to be, everybody's speaking about the medium right now. Is this bifurcated? Is this going to be VR or is it going to be AR? And it's really going to be both. And the best devices are going to blend them seamlessly at some point in the future. When that's going to happen, I don't know.
Makes sense. But why, one other than valuation, many people coming in? What is it? What's the most compelling thing about Magic Leap in your mind?
Okay, so I think it's investors. We're going to learn a lot. I hope that we learn more and more as Google gets more and more involved, right, from its investment. Google I/O is coming up in 2 weeks or something, right?
Okay.
I put money on the fact that they're going to announce a new VR headset, a better version of Cardboard, which is going to be maybe a step above where the Samsung Gear is right now. But it's not going to be an all-in-one with positional track. It's not going to be Oculus or Vive without a wire. No way. Like that's my prediction. And I could be wrong in 2 weeks, so we'll see. Magic Leap presents an opportunity for so I'm going to use VR incorrectly on purpose, for VR to become omnipresent. Now, if you can have Johnny Ive design from Apple, the guy that make Apple products beautiful with Steve Jobs, if you can have someone that can make a beautiful product that just doesn't look invasive, doesn't look like Robert Scoble in the shower wearing Google Glass, that just is not good for its image. And if it can,
I'll tell Robert that later on.
And if you can, kind of have compelling use cases that are not requiring of, the genius of this is that it works for experts and it works for your grandma, right? Like anybody can work with a touchscreen interface. It captures the entire spectrum. So I think if the UI and the technology combined with the content use cases are as compelling as they suggest right now, it has the ability to change everything. So when they say the next meaningful computing platform, that's what I think of That's the closest to my ideal of what that might be right now. Everything we've seen, further to what some of the guys were saying, was their videos. It's like if you remember the Microsoft HoloLens video when they played Minecraft at E3 or something, or GDC. It's a video that looks really cool when it's like kind of CGI'd a little bit. It's played with a little bit. When you put the HoloLens on, your field of view is like this much. So you only really see here, the augmented reality application. So you don't know. I haven't been able to get a demo because they make you sign a fat NDA, and you can't do that as a venture investor, right? And you have to go to Florida to try it too. So I don't know from personal experience. If I did, obviously as a result of NDA, I couldn't say anything. So
Right.
everything I'm talking about is what slipped out, from the press. The one concern I have is, so they're actually, you're getting secondary sales of their shares right now. Their Series B, I think it's obviously public. You talk to one investor, everyone knows. I'm not looking at it, and it's not something that's come across my desk, but just from the grapevine, you're getting people selling, I think at the Series C or the Series B valuation right now, secondary tranches. That means I have my shares, I'm selling to another investor who wants to take my stake over. Why would they do that? If you don't believe, they obviously have asymmetric information. They know more about Magic Leap than any of us do, right? Because they've been investors already. And they did a lot of diligence at the beginning. They have a direct line to Roni, the CEO, and to other folks on the executive team. So why are they selling? There's a variety of excuses that I've heard as to why they might be. My assessment of that is that I think this is going to take a hell of a lot longer to productize and to make it beautiful and all those things I just said. I think we're a while away from that with Magic Leap. The use cases and experiences that they've built so far are indicative of something amazing. And that's built into the future value of the current cash flows and all that kind of stuff,
Got
right?
it.
Whatever, I said it wrong, but yes, that. So I think there's big, big promise, a long road ahead for execution. But once again, this is set as an outsider looking in from here to Florida.
I think
That's a good analysis of it.
I think some of the challenge with a lot of the earlier VR companies, and if you look at Jaunt and you look at other platforms like that, their burn is exceptionally high. And that poses an issue for a venture investor because, if I put my capital into the next round, it's just going to be set on fire on paying, 10 engineers and however many other individuals at the company. And my concern about Magic Leap is their burn. And the same with Jaunt and a couple of other organizations as well. Now, I'm much more pro on the smaller VR startups that are using capital in a very sensible kind of lean startup methodology type approach. So I think they're selling stock because this is such a bloody expensive company to run, and it will continue to be.
And smaller funds, not to call your fund smaller, but funds that are not in $1 billion, right, raised, like some of the top tier VCs in the Valley who have been doing that for a while, raising a lot of money from the limiteds. They can't even play in the unicorns, right? You kind of, in essence, are shut out of investing because probably the minimum investment is quite high, and in your ROI on whatever you can put in is probably not going to be comparable to some other company you can invest in.
So the company itself, when you get in, as a little fund, right? We don't pertain to ever play with the big boys, right? We get in very early. But often the company is something very different at that stage, and it morphs over time into the behemoth that it becomes, right? So typically what we can do, if we want to get involved in later stage rounds, like I'm not going to, but if I was going to invest in Magic Leap's tranche of secondary Series B shares, for example, that is something I'd go to my LPs for and say, hey, a couple of them are LA entertainment companies, so I'll say, you guys want access to this deal that we have? We'll set up an SPV, and we might do something like that. We never have, and we haven't to date, but the option exists to do that. So little
That's
funds
good
can
to
play
know.
up, play downstream a little bit if they want.
It's interesting, but you can't really spread the wealth in a portfolio. It's hard to do these deals over and over.
It's our job to
Yeah.
find the next unicorn.
Yeah, you were there
So,
really on the front line.
Yeah, I mean, my venture partner was the first money into Android and into TrueCar and into MySpace.
Right.
And that's our job, is to find those earlier companies.
That's the fun part of it.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
then, Sen, your job is to find all these exciting M&A opportunities. Anything that's for you guys, for you and Kelman, anything that's coming to mind that you're seeing that you think is going to be a hot M&A market?
I think we're going to see more on the augmented reality side. I think that's been less prominent so far for M&A. And then in terms of virtual reality, I think you could start to see some interesting software plays as more software becomes mature and starts coming out in the market.
I think the M&A side of the equation, for me anyways, is a little bit more murky. In general, my view of the space is that there's a real chicken and the egg problem, which is, you don't have the content and, you don't have necessarily the platform and you don't know which to bet on first. And, thinking about an M&A exit, typically driven by, some sort of financial metrics, and lots of these companies don't have any financial metrics. They might have interesting technology, but it's very hard for me to discern what Oculus is going to deem interesting enough to spend $50 million on. So, what I've been focused more on the fundraising side, and I'm seeing some interesting things happening there. I do think that there's a lot of both venture and corporate money interested in putting money to work behind some of these interesting technologies, and particularly out of China. I've seen a lot of Chinese investors recently putting money into everything, but particularly in AR, VR. I've seen some platforms garner some pretty large, very healthy valued rounds from the Chinese that think they can take some of this technology and I believe expand it into their market, which is obviously much larger than ours. But for me, the M&A side of the equation is a little bit harder to see. One question I actually have for the panel is, when do you guys think this becomes mass market? At what point in time do you think that the everyday consumer is going to have some kind of virtual reality device and use it on a daily basis?
That's 5+ years away, at least. I would say more likely even 10. When we say mass market, that's what a smartphone is now. Think about it, it took 8 years, right, from 2008 to smartphones to now where we're at with billions of smartphones out there. I think defining what you think is VR, like I said, if we get a hiccup and we damage use cases, with most people's first experience being 360 video, I don't think it's that wow for people to say, oh my God, I need this, I need to be in this all the time. Having social relevance, so your friends being in it and having network effects as a result is important. So I think one of Facebook's largest pushes is actually in social VR. Have that telepresence like with your friends. I encourage everyone to Google the Facebook's Toy Box experience that they demonstrated at F8, the Facebook conference 2 weeks ago. I could be in London and my sister could be in Silicon Valley and we can have a seamless conversation walking around with each other as avatars, right? We're actually interacting with the environment around us, we're playing games at the same time around us. That's awesome. It requires a $2,000 PC, a $700 headset, and an internet connection that's usually hardwired into the wall because Wi-Fi is too spotty. So when does it become pervasive? It depends for what. When you say pervasive, that means for everything, 10, right? 10 years. If you say, when does it become mass market, we could define that as being, when does it start to have a consumer monetization angle? I think gaming will have that as soon as it's Christmas, with PlayStation VR really being pushed and all the games, the VR games that are in the pipeline. They know how to make games. They've been doing it for like 10 plus years, 15 years with the PlayStation consoles, right? So I think mass market, not comparable to the current console ecosystem, but bigger than we are now. This Christmas for games, I think, is going to start. For cinematic and content, we're still a while away because, I mean, there's still a lot of folks here in the audience that are, they're the pioneers that are actually going out there and learning what works in VR and what doesn't and what resonates with audiences. So I've seen some amazing horror experiences that I think lend themselves very well to VR. I've seen some great, exploratory Nat Geo style experiences that are out there. But remember, it's those experiences where you have amazing positional tracking and I can walk around in the world. That's all coded in a game engine. That's all done in Unity or Unreal right now. So that's what I said, special effects guys, they know how to work with these game development tools to create these really immersive worlds, but it's not actually real, right? I know I'm walking around in a CG environment. So the photogrammetry and some of the other stuff I think that it will take to get the average Joe, like your mom or something, involved in VR. I think there's a lot that still needs to be figured out to make that level of immersion meaningful to the average Joe.
I think that the biggest challenge is, and we see a lot of people trying to find comps for VR, right? And a lot of people mention mobile technology. Now, if you consider when the first mobile mass market phone came out in 1997, at least in England when I first bought my phone, it was crap. it was a big chunky black phone. We then progressed to flip phones, and then finally in 2007, 2008, the iPhone was launched. People wanted the iPhone because the technology was such a leap to be able to play your music, watch videos, check your emails. To have that FaceTime conversation was so important, but people were crying out for it. Right now, nobody really wakes up and says, I really want a VR headset. And the reason being is that the barriers to entry to work that out are quite high. You mentioned this, almost a $3,000 when you wrap in tax for the entire rig, or for the PlayStation VR, it's still $400. So until people can start to see that and try it on and get a lot more. So your question about all the different headsets, I'm actually quite glad about all the different headsets, because I want to see as many people using this as possible and realizing how cool it is.
But I think there has to be some kind of industry catalyst event, and
Yeah.
not that I've done the research, but if you think about different big disruptive markets, and you go back to something like, so take your example of the smartphone. I was amongst there. In fact, I financed Palm Source, the software play for Palm, but that was sort of probably the first big or significant smartphone. And then you fast forward to when the iPhone came out, and I think one of the things that really broke the iPhone open was the large availability of apps. So that was sort of like a catalyst, one of the big catalyst events, which then started to let it permeate to the mass market. And if you think about video on demand, just going even way back to the Time Warner trials, which happened, I don't know, like in the early 1990s, in the 80s, and even if you look at TiVo coming out, but going beyond TiVo, what I think really broke open video on demand was when the cable operators decided to incorporate that functionality directly into the cable boxes. And that's what really started to break open video on demand. So I don't know what the catalyst event would be for VR or AR, but I think there has to be something along with everything else that we've been talking about.
And what concerns me is that the App Store right now for Oculus still has the old tropes of the problem with the current App Store, which is discovery is fundamentally broken. Finding an app that you want is really hard to do, and I know that Apple have employed 100 people to try and solve that problem right now, and it has to happen. But if you go into the Oculus App Store, even though there's limited content, it's still the same process of finding
So
content.
would BarCrypt solve that?
Well, it could certainly help in regards to distribution and encryption. What will be very, very interesting is more users generate their own content and they self-distribute globally and they monetize that. So for everyone in the room that's making their own content now, imagine if you could just make it, load it onto a platform that has a player, and you can distribute it globally, and you've completely just disrupted every single system of media distribution that we have right now in the world. Nobody can tell you no if you distribute via blockchain. Oculus can't tell you no. Samsung can't tell you no. HTC, Sony, you will be the master of your own destiny when you're making and distributing and encrypting your own content. And that, I think, is going to be very, very interesting for new forms of VR content, not only for VR content, AR content, but also for technology, for apps. It's really its own ecosystem.
Why, Ethan? Why is that possible? Is that possible today? Like,
Yeah,
let's
it
say you
is.
have a VR, programming that's maybe 5 minutes long. What would you do to do that?
Well, it all goes back to the cryptography, because you can really build blockchains to do anything that you want, and it's all in the actual code. So, it's people go, well, how do you know this isn't going to become Napster? Well, Napster, there was copyright infringement. In the actual encryption in the blockchain, you, as the content creator, get to track all of your own content, and you can set the price, you can allow microtransactions, you can do pretty much anything you want, and you can also track what people are doing with your content. So, but getting back to, is it 5 years or is it 7 years where this is going to be this quotidian experience that we all use every day? VR and AR, they have, in the short run, it's going to be 360. I absolutely agree that Sony, because they have the built-in user base, they're going to probably be one of the most dynamic sources for VR gaming, because they already have it built in, and they seem to have a pretty compelling price point. It's not going to be as high as Oculus, and you can add it on top of PlayStation. And you said earlier that what sold Xbox? It was Halo. What is going to be that VR content that's everybody's going to have that's going to make them buy it? What is that? What is that experience? Is there going to be a Jaws type event that you only get to have on a VR platform? We don't have that yet. And not to mention, we don't have the market yet. And I mean, we're all sitting here. I'm putting on my investment banker hat for a second. What are the comps? How do you look at what is the business model? How do we look at, if this is a private equity model, 5 to 7 years, I mean, how do you look at any type of projection that makes any sense right now? If you want to take write a private equity check and get a return for 5 to 7 years, because you're completely flying in the dark right now. So those are all going to be problems that have to be worked out, because there are going to be failures in VR. There's going to be failures in content distribution. There's going to be failures also in the monetization. And some of these goggles that don't have content behind them, I think they're also going to fail. Otherwise, what's going to make them unique?
I think Sony's got a great opportunity, but also it's a huge challenge in the sense that if you look for a comp for a not a similar, but somewhat similar peripheral, you could look at Kinect. Now, Kinect had a massive attachment rate. I think it was between 8 to 10% of all Xbox 360 owners, which was great. But the repeat usage was pretty poor because there was a dearth of content. It was the same old sports, bowling, bow and arrow type experience game. I'm a huge gamer. But Sony has to solve that problem, and it needs lots of content. Now, Sony has traditionally had a fairly high walled garden when it comes to getting content onto there. So this is a great opportunity for you content creators out here, is to try and get as many relationships with Sony as possible and try and talk to them, because it could become that dust gathering peripheral in your living room.
Right. Hopefully not.
Hopefully not, and I'm sure it won't. But they're a gaming company.
Yeah.
They're not known for social media, platforms or other things. So it's a really interesting time for Sony.
And what's interesting about this business model that Ethan's working on is that, if I'm getting it correctly, and might not be, I read your white paper and all that, you're sort of betting on the fact that you can take YouTube and like an iTunes app store and Netflix and kind of combine them together, distribute it widely through this distributed model for VR, AR, and then really sort of, in some way affect all media distribution. Is that kind of the way that's going?
Well, yeah, I mean, getting back to the IPFS and having access to multiple blockchains, the applications there go beyond media content and distribution. You can use this to sell real estate. We could track all of the chain of title. We could make classrooms infinite in size, because really all a blockchain is a publicly distributed ledger. It can be built to handle anything in the actual code. Blockchain applications also could be one of the best ways to control and harness artificial intelligence, especially for mission-specific opportunities. Say you want to sequence genomes for bringing back extinct species, or you want to get the greatest cardiologists together on a platform, and they could actually distribute all of their knowledge through a blockchain, and it's going to be harnessed and encrypted. The applications for blockchain technology are completely unlimited. The best thing about it is the redundancy, because in order for you to hack a blockchain, you literally have to hack the computer of every single person that is actually what are called miners, are actually mining and verifying what is in the blockchain universe. So if you just think of code in a generally distributed public ledger, you really can do anything with it.
And for the media professionals in the room, you can transport any kind of media. So does anyone have a question? Because we're only a few minutes away from, no, it started at 10:15. It's 11. We ended at 11:15.
The sort of chicken and egg problem looking at the successes of the iPhone and the App Store. At some point, one had to exist before the other, and the other one was lagging and had to catch up. Didn't seem to affect consumer adoption there. Compare that to Kinect, which did have the same problem, not enough good content, and their hardware was bad. So, what were the differences in those two models so we can predict and try to prevent that from happening in the VR?
Yeah, I think the difference with the iPhone is while apps are fantastic, you could buy an iPhone and use it without apps. In fact, my parents have iPhones without apps on them. They had the killer app, which is voice, right? And so you already needed that device and you were acclimated to using it. Whereas if you buy an Oculus or another headset and you don't have content, what do you do with it? It collects dust in your living room.
Go ahead.
Does anybody have any market penetration data on the year at this point? I mean,
last 30, 60, 90 days. We see that as a pretty accessible opportunity from a VR content perspective. And the experience has been, we've been touring at festivals and we've had a lot of positive response to their content from that. Any feedback on how fast you see that escalating? Are they capturing, or is that data still?
I haven't seen that much. I'm curious to see what happened with the S7 incentive, which was the free headset, but it was only ran for a very short period of time, so I'm not sure if it's a particularly great data set to measure. My only nervousness about the Gear is that it's to create immersive content on that, it's very difficult because it's quite an underpowered device. So I'd be slightly cautious about what you want to put on there. I think for 360 video, it works really well. But right now in this current generation, even if it does reach massive market scale, which I don't think it has, then the type of content you're going to put on it is quite limited.
I have a question well, for anyone, but I want to direct it to Sunny initially. I make a bunch of different content. I've made video stuff, run ventures with mobile startups over the last couple of years. And I was curious about one thing. Have you ever cried in a video game or emoted like significantly? It's a loaded question deliberately because you were quite open.
I mean, as a player or inside the game?
Or as an investor. No, I'm just kidding.
A lot of games have made me cry as an investor, yeah. Yeah. So I used horror as an example, right? Earlier as a medium that as a genre that lends itself very well to the medium. You're already open, very much so, to being scared when you're watching horror. You want that. That's why you go, right, to a movie or to like playing a horror game. The last one that I saw that was truly immersive, high production quality, etc., was Fear, F.E.A.R, right? Very successful PC game, kind of mixed elements of The Ring, of Japanese horror, etc. I think. In terms of have I cried in anything in VR yet? No. Have I like shrieked like a little girl from some VR horror experiences? Once, and it was a paranormal activity, like promotional experience that was done by an LA-based media company named Beast VR.
Yeah, that is a platform that.
You were quite quick to dismiss the idea of 360 video. For a variety of different reasons, a lot of which I agree with. However, history has indicated that while the gaming market as a rule, as in where we give the players agency, creates a phenomenal business in terms of revenue, it creates fairly crappy experience in terms of emotion, and VR actually intensifies emotion. Because, for example, at least for me, and I'm pretty sure there are many agree, the emotional highlights of our media experiences. We'll go on a roller coaster with J.J. Abrams, but we play a video game, it's kind of like, okay, cool, it's fun, regardless of what age we are. You don't remember it the same way, you don't experience it the same way. I was wondering whether you thought that would be fixed, or whether it's not important.
So it's already being fixed. There's a company here that we're an investor in named 8i down in Culver City that's doing light field capture, right, as I was referring to earlier. If you can get real human performances within VR, and those are the people that you're interacting with, and as that stuff becomes live, to the point of where a real performance is imported into VR live, and your environment looks very real and interacts with physics, et cetera, and graphics the way that it should in real life, I think those human performances imported into VR will make for much more of an emotional rapport between audience and filmmaker. So I believe it's coming. I think being the ghost of Christmas past and floating through a static 360 video, I don't think lends to that same degree of immersion and therefore emotional resonance. So happy to discuss more offline, but I'm generally thinking that 360 video is going to be here for UGC, and there'll be some great professional content that comes out of it too. I just think when I'm thinking long term on what this becomes, I don't think that Ernest Cline was thinking of 360 video when he's thinking about the Oasis.
I actually think the video games have ever caused me to have emotion already. Have you played The Last of Us, PS3, PS4? Yeah. And that is a deeply moving game, and I'll hand up, I cried in that game because it was a really fantastic storyline and incredible motion capture. Also, Firewatch is another great game that has really caused me to have emotion, The Journey as well. I didn't cry or scream or anything in Paranormal Activity. It certainly was pretty sketchy, but the experience I've loved and enjoyed the most, which I felt was the most immersive, was the John Wick experience created by Starbreeze, which is if you can speak to the guys at Lionsgate, you can try that out. And that is a truly wonderful experience. And it uses Vive in the way that it should be used. And I encourage you to watch a video about that.
I would just make one quick observation on emotion, which is I think that some of the first-person shooter games and the run-and-gun games like COD, I mean, that can get your heart pumping. And when you get that adrenaline rush, that's emotion. It's just not
That's a good
crying.
point. Yeah.
Okay, one more question from the back.
It's more of a theoretical question, I think, but given where we are currently, the amount of VR investment seems substantial, if not too much. How do you see that affecting AR if, in the theoretical, the VR market doesn't turn out to be this $150 billion market that Goldman Sachs and people are predicting, and there's a bit of a bubble burst? Do you see that affecting the future investment in AR and what's referred to MR?
I have some thoughts, but I want to hog microphone time all the time, so it's just, if anybody else.
Yeah, you can answer it, Sunny. It's okay.
Okay, I'll give a very quick answer. So the bubble bursts if Magic Leap bursts, because all those numbers that you've been seeing about AR, VR investments, Magic Leap, everything else. Okay, that's where a lot of the money and the dollars have been going into for the stats and the numbers that you've been seeing. What Goldman is getting their, their equity research people on, their little videos saying that it's going to be such a big market by this stage, or DigiCapital has its reports out there with numbers of I think they already lowered it by 30 billion from 150 billion market size for AR and VR by 2020 to 120 billion because AR is further away. Okay, so I think a lot of people have already assessed that those numbers are somewhat headline and sensational. So just keep that in mind. If the bubble bursts, someone like Magic Leap doesn't work, or if PlayStation VR post-Christmas retail push doesn't work, or if a kid ends up, heaven forbid, something terrible happens to him while in a VR headset and a big negative press kind of push comes out there, it's going to hurt the whole industry. The two segments that traditionally push any new tech platform, does anyone know what they are? What did you say? Porn and sports. Well, it's porn and games, actually, is what pushes it. Absolutely. One is not going to get a lot of push and mainstream press because it's porn. The other one is gaming, and that only speaks to a small segment. So the wider realm of content that's currently being created, that Oculus Story Studio is funding, that HTC's $100 million accelerator fund is going to be going into, and that there's countless other brands, et cetera, that I talked about that will be funding content, that's essential to not continue the bubble to flow, because I don't think it's a bubble. I think a bubble implies that it's going to pop. These are very big, calamitous, act of God kind of events, in my opinion, that all need to happen before the industry goes away. I think we wouldn't be sitting here and betting a significant portion of our careers on the validity of VR's likely ascendancy if we thought those things were a likelihood. So,
if you're in VR and you're creating stuff for content or technology or whatever for it, I just make sure you keep thinking about optionality. That's the biggest thing that we look for in startups, is the ability to pivot in a meaningful, logical way. And VR, if these bubbles do pop, or if they don't, or if something else emerges, let's say there's something about health and safety. No one quite knows what this does to your eyes. If you're putting it in front of your face for 4 or 5 hours a day for a year, who knows? Just keep having options. Keep thinking about other things that you can do to move into other areas.
So that starts the 1-minute wrap-up of the most important kind of word of wisdom you'd like to share with our audience as we leave the panel today. So would you like to add anything to that?
Optionality is my
Optionality is the way to go.
Yeah.
Kelman, you have?
I mean, I think what I learned was stay away from 360-degree cameras.
I'm going to steal something that Rob said, be brave.
Be brave.
I just think there's a lot of big companies out there that aren't in VR yet, and there's a lot of people out there who haven't tried it. Hardly anyone has tried good AR, and I don't see a future where large companies and people aren't going to have both VR and AR in their lives.
I think 2016 is the year of survival for VR companies, but also the year of mass market demos. You're going to see a lot more demos across retail experiences, et cetera, this year and early next.
And I'd like to thank our audience for being so wonderfully participative and patient today. And thank you, wonderful panelists, for sharing words of wisdom with us.